It's the Exit 52 podcast, Sunday night, November 17th, 8:56 p.m. We are presented by Jimmy's Famous Seafood here on tonight's Instant Analysis. My name is Jake Louque. I'm joined by my guy Banks from my hotel room. It's my bedroom. Banks having a little fun with me there as we're doing a little bit of a stripped down, pared down broadcast tonight on my end because I got to get right to bed after this. And frankly, I just don't give that much of a shit about this game one way or the other to really dive into the nitty gritty. Spenny and Taylor both MIA, so it's the the hula hula boys are here to break this one down for you guys. Yeah, and it's not one that's going to be fun to break down or talk about all that much. For me, one that I wouldn't call super surprising. Spenny and I both called for a loss on the preview. I would say there was probably a little bit of a Skip Bayless trying to do the reverse jinx thing there and, will the Ravens to victory that way. That was definitely there, but I think I had valid reasons for thinking the Ravens would not walk away with a win here. I think they were proven correct. I think this was a game where it kind of felt like the inverse of a lot of Ravens wins that we've watched this season, where it felt like the defense really showed up in this one. It felt like they kind of stood on their head, particularly in the red zone and in crucial areas of the field and in high leverage situations. They continued holding the Steelers out of the end zone. They did that all day. But at the end of the day, it's Chris Boswell coming up with 6 field goals. It is the offense struggling to move the ball, turning it over 3 times, twice in their own territory, leading to those field goals. And ultimately, just that 1,000-yard stare from the offense as they walk off the field, having lost 18-16, letting a crucial win slip through your fingers that would have really helped you out in a division race, pushing Pittsburgh to, I believe, 8-2 or 8-3. I wish I had again, I really don't care much about this one. So they're 8-2, Ravens 7-4. It's a big gap. It's a big gap.
Game and the Ravens are going to game and a half.
Game and a half, yeah. And the Ravens, listen, they're going to see him again in M&T Bank in a couple of weeks. But they've got a murderer's row of a schedule here in front of them as they head into what I guess you could officially call this the home stretch of the season. I think this is your final 6 going to LA next Monday night to play the Chargers, but you're putting yourself in a bad spot for those games, dropping to 7-4. And overall, Brian, it feels like pretty much every Lamar Jackson era game against the Steelers, it feels like we've seen some variation of this kind of thing go on where the offense they come into it, all the signs point to them, being able to continue what they had rolling. They had that massive performance against the Bengals offensively anyway last week. They had a week and a half to prepare for this one, but they just came out, and I wouldn't even say they looked that flat. They moved the ball okay, not great certainly, but the fumble from Henry set a weird tone early on. Obviously, the fumble by Likely right there before the half, which is just completely unnecessarily giving away 3 points. The interception, I'd call that a little unlucky with Justice Hill running the wheel route against that kid from NC State who, a miraculous job by him to pick it off. And overall, it's just the Pittsburgh Steelers know how to win football games. Mike Tomlin knows how to elevate talent that might not necessarily be, especially on the offensive side of the ball and at the quarterback position for them, on par with the best in the league. And John Harbaugh and the Ravens playing down to their opponents. And overall, I think this is a very good Steelers team. It's one that wouldn't shock me if they wanted to win the division, but the Ravens had every opportunity to go and win this thing, and they don't because of the turnovers, because of 2 missed field goals from Justin Tucker on 3 attempts. Just an absolute seppuku of a game. Just they whipped out the katana and they just shoved it into their own abdomen, and that is what we saw today. And it just makes me wonder right off the bat, I'll ask you this, is this a Super Bowl contending type team to you?
The pieces are all there, but again, like we talk about this a lot of weeks, it's like, hey, they've got a lot of pieces. At some point, you got to put the pieces together. God, the seppuku word, man, that's tough. Like,
I mean, it's like
I don't disagree. Like, it's fuck. Like when you put it in so many terms, it's like, oh, geez, man, that's.
It's so either tough. That or I like to go to the Plaxico as well to shoot yourself in the foot.
Oh man, yeah, turnover battle. Gosh, it's so tried and true. Talking about that, and then the way you described, missed field goals, like that clicked in my head in a certain moment there, where it's like you look at it that way and you lose the turnover battle in a way 5-0. Like that is so extravagant. Like it's so big, and you think about it too. It's like if you can just clean that up in some capacity where even that margin gets shrunk to 2 or 3, you're probably in position to win the football game. So that gives you that little tickle of the balls, like, oh fuck, like the difference between these two football teams is, I mean, like, let's be serious. Like, who walked away from today's football game or the first 11 weeks of the season, 10 weeks, whatever it was going into this game, and thought, what's the difference between these two football teams? I don't think anybody thought one was a markedly before, like, ahead of the other. If anyone, it was the Ravens. And you walk away from this football game and the result is the result, and you have to respect the result. But with the five call them turnovers or possessions that are flushed and the other team goes the other way, well, I guess, okay, let me also respect the idea that they kind of fluttered one over to Marlin. So let's minimize that to 4. At the same time, it's like, man, why can't we go win a football game like this one? And we've won our fair share of football games that have been tight ones and against good football teams this season. But this specifically, the Pittsburgh Steelers, go a step further in Pittsburgh. Like, this felt like the type of game that the guys should have been on their shit, Like, this is the game where you are disciplined because you know that these games get a little bit spicy. These are the games where you got to tuck the football in because everyone's trying to make that hero play. Everybody's trying to rip a ball out. Like, at some point that has to matter, right? Like, why has this happened so consistently, specifically seemingly in Pittsburgh, where we cannot seem to make the simple plays or protect the football or do whatever it takes to come out ahead? And I feel like there was, like, let's talk John Harbaugh era. All right. There was a hump of sorts early in the Joe Flacco era where it didn't seem like we could get across the goal line there and win that big game. And then Joe Flacco went there and did it. He went there with that big throw to Torrey Smith. Everybody remembers it. If I remember
92-yard drive, 92-yard drive in the
was
last 2 minutes.
One of the biggest triple XL pouch.
Yeah,
to steal a phrase. Triple XL pouch wins that I could ever remember. And man, I'm waiting for Lamar to make his moment in this rivalry, and he clearly did not play his best game whatsoever. First half was really rocky. I thought that he made some, big plays in the second half here, but I don't know. I expected more, and I expected more attitude and more just alpha energy towards, hey, this is a team that is not as good as us. Let's go into their barn and fucking take it. And that's not what I saw for today. I saw a little bit of acquiesce to their general juju and let the big moment get the best of them. There was a lot of scrappiness between both teams, unsportsmanlike between both sides, offsetting, whatever. And that was, I think, like, there were key pieces along the way that maybe made the result, but I was ultimately disappointed by just the general notion that we didn't seem to have that, call it the Brian Billick Banshee, go in there with a spear attitude.
Yeah, no, it just feels like two teams that handle these types of situations differently. And I'm not going to give the Steelers a ton of credit because, listen, they haven't even really been in the playoffs and been in the spots that the Ravens have been in. But certainly in the regular season and definitely against the Ravens, they come into it with an attitude that, you know what, throw the record books out. Like the old cliches about the rivalry games, like they seem to get up for these games. They seem ready, willing, and able to go out there and punch somebody in the mouth regardless of what the outcome is going to be. You look at guys like TJ Watt, who's infuriating to watch as an opposing fan. You look at a guy like George Pickens, who is just an absolute circus act of a human being. I mean, really good player, but can also be kind of frustrating probably as a fan of his, just because of, not even just the antics, but just some of the crazy shit that he does. Like when he didn't get the 2 feet down at that one point in the game overall. But yeah, it's just a weird mental hurdle with the Steelers team. Lamar Jackson moves to 1-4 against them. Saw a stat. I think Jerry Dulac, who's a Steelers reporter, tweeted it out. I think in the last 8 matchups, or it might even be more than that, neither team has scored over 20. Lamar Jackson starting 5 of those games. You can't score 20 against this team, and you're going out there and you're putting up 30 and 40, plus against the Bengals in those 2 matchups, and some of these other games where you're going out there and you're punching the Bills in the mouth, who just knocked off the the 9-0 Chiefs. All of a sudden, they're looking like the hot thing in the league, and I don't know, just it defies any sort of reasoning. It defies any sort of logic, and it really does speak to the old cliche about rivalry games where you throw out the record books, and for whatever reason, that seems to fire the Steelers up, and it seems to wilt the Ravens down, and it seems to, I don't know if I want to say they crumble under the pressure or anything, because I think that's a little bit of an overblown narrative, because they have, shown some pretty big stones in close games throughout the rest of the season. But the Steelers team specifically, there is just a hurdle that they can't get over. And ultimately, I think it can all be boiled down to that last drive. And we're going to be reminded of that, I think, 2021 game where they go for 2 and they try to throw it over TJ Watt to Andrews. They don't convert that one. They had to go for 2 in this one to tie it up. They go out there. They almost get the snap off on a first attempt that looks like it was going to be QB power, and Lamar Jackson is probably going to walk it in because Tomlin gets that timeout in at the very last second. So you line back up. You've had a timeout to discuss it. You're watching the pre-play stuff going on. Aguilar and Likely is like yelling at Aguilar. He's telling him to do something. He's trying to communicate something. They don't want to call it another timeout. I get why, because you need all 3 of them. But they snap the ball. Nobody knows what's going on. Lamar Jackson runs to the left. The play seems to kind of be going to the right on the other side. No receivers are moving anywhere. There's no kind of movement there. So is it a quarterback run? Is it some kind of pop pass? Is it, what is it supposed to be? I don't know. I don't think they knew before the ball was going to be snapped. And I'm sure they'll look back at the tape now and say, oh, shit, like I lined up wrong. We didn't know what the call was, whatever the explanation might be. But it's just in those moments, we've seen them be panicked before against the Steelers, and we saw it happen again today. And not like that would have proved the difference in a win or anything, because the Steelers could have driven, for a field goal after that they had converted that if they had. But it speaks to the mental block that I'm talking about. And I'm sure I'm not going to be available this week, but I'm sure Spenny will get into it in the jumbo set with some tape. You could see it throughout the rest of the game too. You talked about Lamar's shaky performance. I don't think he was terrible in this game, but he was certainly not very good. And early on, he's moving around a little bit. Guys aren't getting open. Steelers are doing a good job jamming guys off the line, not letting receivers get separation. Made a couple nice tight window throws, but some other ones where he's just off platform. I remember he sailed Andrews on like a 2nd and 10 where he's trying to throw it in tight to him. He had a couple other plays where he just didn't look comfortable. And it just seems like he never feels comfortable against the Steelers team. Again, I don't know what it is, and hopefully he'll have some kind of answer. Hopefully he'll be a little bit more ready the next time these 2 teams play, because at this point you're hoping that game has a lot of consequence. It's not that it does right now. It's that you're hoping it to, because you've got, like I said, a difficult ass schedule. And if you want to stay within this AFC North race, you're going to have to win most of your games going towards that game. Then you're going to have to win that game. And then you're probably going to have to continue to win after that if you want to have any hope of winning this division. So tough to feel good after this one. I said before the season, I thought this team was going to be in kind of a year of transition. I picked them 10-7, maybe win a playoff game. I think some people maybe didn't love that. I think a lot of other people saw them more as Super Bowl contenders. And I was starting to get sucked in after that 5-game winning streak and everything. And, maybe they still could be. But overall, I think on balance, you are what your record says you are. This is a very 7-4 in the hunt for the wild card type of team in my eyes. So to answer the question I asked you earlier about, are they a Super Bowl contending type team? It's really tough for me to say that they are right now.
Are you victory lapping a little bit right now?
Yes and no. It gives me no pleasure to report it. Let's just say that. And I would be very happy to be wrong, because guess what? There's a lot of football left to be played, and it's easy to be prisoners of the moment after a loss like this. But I would
Yeah.
just say that on balance, like, let's look at the offensive line today. McCary, awful game. How many penalties did he have? Like 5? He's getting downfield. He's holding. He's doing just. I mean, it's just
I
like the
thought there were
offensive
some
line
tough calls in there.
probably were. Also,
And there
Taylor.
was a downfield call where like Lamar, this happened multiple times this year, a little pump fake and everybody goes downfield and it just fucks up the flow of the entire play and then it ends up being all right, continue. Sorry.
This is where I was just going to say, this is where we need Taylor Smythe. CBS absolutely dropped the ball today. They were terrible on replays. They were like missing,
Oh my
plays
God.
coming out of the huddle. Like Lamar Jackson is just streaking down the sideline when they're coming out of commercial at one point.
Yeah.
There's like glitches with the audio. They're like getting information wrong. And I mean, this is like a decent team for them. That's Ian Eagle and Charles Davis. Like you would think that they'd be a little bit more prepared, but they were not ready for prime time. Thankfully, the Ravens, upstaged them in that regard. But yeah, not to say that I'm victory lapping, but just to say, as of right now, I feel a little bit more comfortable about that prediction than I did a couple weeks ago when they were rolling, and I was like, okay, I was totally wrong.
Sure. No, you're right to kind of think back to that. And everything's on the table at this point. And perhaps we thought that this Chargers game, we could talk about that this week or whatever, but I mean, we could quickly be 7-5 thinking like, hey, what even is this football team? But god damn. The small things, man. It just feels like I had a moment there late in the first half where we went and got that bucket, we scored the touchdown, and it felt like, okay, this is we're doing who we are, right? We're on track, we're on script, whatever, but it also felt like the wrong time. All right, it's the end of the first half. There's no promise that we just get back into that flow because I feel like there's been a handful of games where um we've maybe just like struggled and just kind of spun our wheels for a little bit and then we just got to find our flow and then it's just bucket after bucket after bucket after bucket and um sometimes that's been like early in the second half, some like the timing wise, like it's been important for us in those moments to like get the ball back pretty immediately and just get back into that flow and just almost like drown the opposing defense where it's like we're just going to get everything we want on you and you just are going to drown in it. And we just never got into that flow I have no idea how many drives we had today, but it was probably around 12. That's usually what you have in a given football game. We just never got into any rhythm whatsoever. Where we just pick up yard after yard and like there were little glimpses of it along the way, like the throw to Likely, whatever that was in the first half, where he just caught the ball 15 yards and then sprinted for another 30 or so. That felt like the 2024 Ravens offense. But there weren't all that many glimpses of that otherwise. And I don't know what was that thing that kept us from getting into the flow of it, but it always seems harder to get into that kind of flow when you're chasing your tail. And this was a game where we were chasing our tail pretty much the entire game. So it's felt like in those moments, and I know I'm speaking so much in the abstract on these, like Bengals game especially, but other games as well, where it's like we just need to get over our hump and just like then it's flowing and it just happens. We have control of the game. It felt like we were struggling to grasp control of the game with this one. We did by taking the lead late in the first half there, and that fumble by Likely seems so costly. It may have only been 3 points, but the general notion of just being ahead at the half, I feel like maybe held some weight. I don't know. I don't know, but
It isn't as
um,
simple as like it's not as simple as this necessarily, but it cost
there's
you
a
3 points.
mental
How many
piece
points did you
to
lose
it.
by? You
Yeah,
lost by.
there's a mental piece to it, and this is maybe a good segue to talk into something that we just have to talk about inevitably. Like, what is the mental calculus of this game if Tucker hits these field goals? Like like what is the general attitude towards all of it if he hits the field goals? It's hard to say. I don't know. It's all like I said abstract, but um that's a tough pill to swallow when, I had all kinds of confidence and I flattered it on Twitter that we were going to come out ahead in the long run and win the game and, be great the rest of the season was the presumption based on my attitude towards it. And there's no question that the missed field goals were penalizing in the ultimate result. Like, there's just no way around it. So I'll hang up and listen.
I mean, that's the difference in the game, right? Again, you fumble it in their territory, they get a field goal off it, you lost by 2. You missed 2 field goals, you lost by 2. Again, like you could go back and say that things would have played out differently if he did make it, and I totally get that argument, but shit, man, that's in any single game, but also in a rivalry game like this where they're keyed up and they're playing renegade and you're in a hostile environment. Every inch counts, every yard counts, and you're goddamn right, every point counts. And if you're going to leave 6 points on the board and you're also going to fumble in their own territory and hand them 6 points, that's massive. And I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, like, you can't even really have a macro conversation on Tucker because of what you're paying him. And I'm really not in favor of it. I'd give him a lot more grace. I'd give him another year at least as a starting kicker of this football team. I think he's built up that goodwill. But man, he's really costing them. I think you look at that Browns game, you could argue he cost them in that. He missed in that Raiders game, cost there. Like this game, I think you could really point to him as a big time reason why they were not able to get this one done. And it just really, like, there's not much to say at that point because you can't do anything with him. Like he's your starting kicker for now and probably for next year. And that's just the way that it's going to be, I think. And I don't know, that gives me no pleasure to report because, like I've been saying, I think this guy still has some good years left in him. He's just going through a really rough patch right now. But man, when you're trying to go and win a division and he does this to you in a game, it really just puts you in a sour state of mind. And I got to wonder what John Harbaugh's thinking. I got to wonder what the special teams unit is thinking. By the way, that Steelers special teams coach, I think you were watching this in a different environment than I was, but I was just in my living room and I was very much keyed in on the CBS broadcast, and they were giving that guy more screen time than fucking Paul Mezcal probably gets in Gladiator 2. I mean, they were all over this guy, and they were doing it last week when I was watching their game, and that's just one of the more infuriating things. This rivalry, the last couple of years, that's infuriated me with stuff like that, and with Tomlin making his little comments about burning the house down. But goddamn it, that's just the way it goes, man. That's the way it goes. I mean, they earn the right, and you can't do anything about it. You got him saying after this one about Patrick Queen, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and you got Lamar Jackson saying, I don't know what's my mental block in with this team, but it's annoying as shit. Like he says something to that effect in the press conference. It's just, it boggles the mind. It's beyond belief, and I really don't know what to say logical about it other than it really pisses me off.
Yeah. Yeah, it really pisses me off. That's why I'm just like trying to swallow what you just said. It fucking pisses me off, man. Justin Tucker. What do we do about Justin Tucker? There's so many people up in arms. I feel like this is the classic, like, let's fire the hitting coach thing with the Orioles, where it's like, we just got to make a change. We got to do something different, like, whatever. Is this a real discussion, Jake? Like,
it's not, but it is. No, it's not, because they're not. Here's the thing: like after every loss, it's fire this coach, fire the head coach, fire the coordinators. It's a conversation among fans, but it's not a real discussion inside of the building. And that's the same thing with Tucker. They're not going to replace him. And I get the frustration, and I get where it comes from, and I get why people say what they do in that frustration. But at the end of the day, like, it's not going to happen. So
yeah,
just don't
let's boil this down to like what the serious like decision making thing should be based upon. Like who is most likely to make that next kick for this football team, and then make them consistently over the long run. All right, so you can look at Justin Tucker having missed X amount of field goals out of his last 10 field goals or X amount of field goals, and it might not be a great record, and that fucking blows, right? And then you can also stretch out the sample size and say, hey, this guy's the most accurate kicker of NFL history, or whatever it is that he's at right now. All right, so I'm looking forward, and I tweeted this a little bit, something along the lines of this mental outlook towards this, right? Who is more likely to make the next 100 field goals for the Baltimore Ravens? All right, somebody off the street, some college kid that we're just going to take a risk on, or is it going to be like Justin Tucker, where he might miss 3 of the next 10, 4 of the next 10, or whatever, and then potentially, and there's no promise that he returns to form. There's no promise, of course, but like that next 90 of that 100, like let's legitimately think about who are you more likely to think who's going to hit those field goals at a better clip, Justin Tucker or some kid that we're going to draft in April.
And the frustrating thing about it too is after the game, like he just kind of no commented it. Basically, he's like, "Yeah, I don't think anything's going wrong. Like it's just every kick is its own thing. I'm not doing anything."
I argue somewhat against that. Like I see the frustration from an audio standpoint. It is frustrating to hear, but at the same time, would you like to hear something different? Like
no, I guess like
clearly always works his ass off.
No, what I'd say is that like what you want him to say is, yes, I'm doing something mechanical. But if like he doesn't feel that way, I don't want him to say it, right? I want him to tell the truth. And if like that's the way that he sees it, then that's fine. And it could also go into the idea that it's just a mental thing too, which it clearly is. Not for nothing, he made a 54-yarder in this game.
He made a huge one.
Yeah, I mean it's still
I would say right? If he makes a 54-yarder to start the game and misses the 2 at the end, that's a whole different story than what we're at now.
Yeah.
I just think it's crazy for people to think, oh, we gotta bring somebody in for competition. It's like, what are you gonna see in practice to warrant putting the best field goal kicker in NFL history on the shelf for some kid off the street?
And you talk about
you watch a guy in practice kick some field goals.
And you talk about in practice too. Like, I think I saw something that like he hit like a 58 or like a 60-yarder in practice before the game. So like it's just, to me, it's just a mental block. And like
and the other thing too is like he missed the extra point last week, and that's probably the most concerning of the entire bunch. And he's missed a good batch of field goals. I am not dismissing this as an issue whatsoever. It's one of those things that it's like we just have to accept as a reality of we're just not as strong in the area of our football team as we typically are. But the guy is not missing field goals by wide margins, and he's not missing short field goals again, other than that extra point. 50-yard field goals, 47-yard field goals. They're all field goals where we're kind of like leaning in, and it just misses the upright by a small margin. Like he's not missing them by a bunch, and it's a one-way miss. Like it's been a consistent one-way miss over multiple months. It's a problem. I'm not dismissing it as a problem. I am just telling everybody who is coming for Justin Tucker's throat to suggest who the fuck is going to come in here and kick better than this guy and be a better guy than this guy for this franchise in the long run. You can try to plug who you want, all you want, but this is an unfortunate truth with the Baltimore Ravens right now. Our guy is a little beaten down. He's not at his best. We have to work around it, and in due time, he's 34 years old. Wash talk is fucking nonsense. 34 years old? There are guys kicking into their 40s, and I know it's a young man's game. It's a long man's game. You got to kick the 60-yarder. It is what it is, and that changes the complexion of who can kick at a late age. But this guy has another decade of field goals in that boot. If you kick him to the curb right now, every fucking team in the NFL is calling his number.
I think also it's probably
ride it out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's an age gap thing too. Like I think there are some newer fans, some younger fans that maybe weren't quite there in the 2013, 2016 type years where there was just no offense, and he's just he was like Chris Boswell today. He would make 6 field goals in a game.
Yeah.
You think about that Lions game in 13. You think about that other Lions game. Yeah, and like it's just it's one of those things where if I have to sit through another half year and then another year of this and he's still struggling, okay, I'm going to sit through it because this guy gave us offense when it was not there for the better part of a decade. And I think, like I said, the leg is still there. I think it's a mental block thing. I think he will get over it. But if I have to give him another year and he's still not performing, that is a deal with the devil I'm happy to make, because he was an undrafted kicker. To your point, undrafted kicker off the street came in. Who would have expected him to beat out Billy Cundiff if he does it? And then he winds up being, to your point, the best kicker in NFL history. So, you just got to stick with him. You got to ride it out. Like I've been making the point, like kickers go through this kind of shit. Like Mason Crosby was done and dusted until he wasn't. Phil Dawson, Robbie Gould, these guys have had stretches. I think Vinatieri probably even had a couple stretches like this. And I get that it's frustrating and it is killing them to an extent in a lot of these games.
It's fucking
fuck,
tough.
man.
I'm not dismissing that. It's fucking sucks right now. See my guy miss field goals.
Yeah, right. Right here, even if Tucker's done, I'd rather go down with him cheering him on in his last days rather than calling on him to be fired. Tucker is a legend. Show him respect. Kelly McCoy. Totally agree with you there. It's just one of those things. And again, it's not even just a sentimental thing. Like you're right. Like nobody else is going to come in and be even markedly better than him or even marginally better than him. I don't think. It's just he's your guy. You got to stick with him for the rest of the year. Like that's it.
There's no argument about it in my mind. Think about the idea that if you were just cut this guy loose, he's gonna pop over to who the fuck knows? Like Kansas City's right now got a guy on the shelf. They're just gonna pop him in the game. like what? Like it's fucking nonsense. Any other team would be so thrilled to pick him up. Like seriously, like that is one of those things that it just boils down to in my mind is there are probably 10 franchises that are a little flimsy on their kicker, probably another 5 to 10 franchises that are like, hey, well, we're just riding it out with our kicker, and then in the offseason, yeah, we're going to sign that guy in a heartbeat. And then the rest are like, yeah, it's just he's literally the best kicker in NFL history.
More dapper, a good point here. I think the fact that we had to settle for field goals that often should be a point of discussion. And that's really what it comes down to. This offense has just got to get their head out of their ass in these types of games. I mean, look what they did against the Bengals. And I get the Bengals do not have nearly as good of a defense as the Steelers. But you got Lamar Jackson. He's highly paid player. You've got Derrick Henry, highly paid. You've got all these assets on offense. You got to be scoring more than 20 points in these games. And you got to be doing it with more than 2 touchdowns, one of which coming right at the very end there. I mean, for all the years that Tucker bailed you out, when you get into spots like these, you got to bail him out yourself a little bit. And you've got the talent on offense to do it. And the offense, to me, that's just the story of the game is they did not execute. They fumbled twice. They had too many stalled out drives, and they're the story of this game. And we really haven't talked much at all about a defense who really showed up today. I mean, Marlon with the interception at the end you mentioned, Roquan with a ton of tackles.
How encouraging is a lot of that?
Trey White, couple big plays coming in off that trade. I mean, pretty darn good performance by the defense today, and it was wasted.
There's so much of that that honestly is encouraging. Like we got after the quarterback in a big way. Owe was all over him. Even though Van Noy, maybe a couple penalties in there, but he was just involved. Like he just felt like part of the game in a way that he hasn't been in 5 or 6 weeks. Just swarming the football. Man, Kyle Hamilton was a factor. There were a lot of good defensive things that just didn't amount to anything because of the way that the football game ended. But there's just so much to be encouraged by in terms of how this football team can play defensively in the construct of an ugly football game, right? We're going to play a bunch of these ugly football games in theory if we want to go win a championship. The Steelers aside, but the Chiefs are playing these types of football games. If we want to go win these, the defensive side of the ball has to play the way they did today. And this was awfully encouraging in the sense that they can play that type of game. I know that as a whole, 60 minutes of football, the offense and do their side, I think that's the key point. That's our entire point right now. But if there's one takeaway that can be encouraging, it's like the defense played just like some gritty football, got off the field. The third down conversion, CBS was lighting up that graphic. Just every time on third down, it was 1 of 13, 1 of whatever. Like that was a very refreshing sight to see, while also being a little frustrating because we just have not been able to get off the field consistently on third down, and that's why we've kept games that we should blow teams out in consistently. We've kept teams in it because we haven't been able to put them away because we haven't been able to get off the field on third down. But like I said, like if we can continue to do the things we did today defensively, like gosh, it's like all the ingredients are there. We just gotta fucking put it together. So fuck your 10-7 energy, Jake. We're not doing that. All right, man.
Listen, I would be nothing would make me happier than to be wrong, and for them to go 11-6 or 12-4, whatever it might be, or whatever 12-5. God, I fucking hate the
No, it's so
new.
bad. It's so bad. It's
It's
16 games. 16
yeah,
games. Like,
that's what we need. Let's go
ugh.
back to that. Yeah, let's go
Yeah.
back to that.
We're
Roquan
gonna
Smith.
learn a lot next Monday night.
We are, and we're gonna learn. I mean,
It's gonna be
hopefully
fun.
this is your gut check game. Like, hopefully this is the game that you really lock it in and you put a full game together in all three phases next week. That's what you need to do, or come close enough to it, or do what you need to do in one phase and show out in the other phase, and just go win a game against a good Chargers team who is up 21-6 on the Bengals right now in LA. They're looking pretty good, so it's going to be a tough one. Roquan Smith, 13 combined tackles to lead the team. He had to leave with a hamstring issue. I didn't see any news on that after the game. Ardarius Washington and Kyle Hamilton, 11 tackles for Ardarius, 10 for Kyle. They both look good in their role. I think they were both kind of they were playing that shell with them, both over the top, middle of the field open type thing. I thought they looked good. When they went to the middle of the field close type looks, and they had a couple of those throws to Pickens on the left sideline, he made one catch, but then you had Trey White, who I mentioned, coming in and making up a couple nice plays in the end zone when he was kind of on an island by himself. So that was encouraging. 2.5 sacks for OA, half a sack credited to Brandon Stevens, and Broderick Washington with a nice sack as well. I thought Matabike was disruptive. He only had 5 tackles. That he didn't wind up getting a sack in this game. I thought he would have been, just watching it on the broadcast.
He was a presence.
Yeah, he was. And overall, man, if they can play up to this par or close to it, I know there are better offenses out there than the Steelers. I would certainly put the Chargers in that camp. It's a gut check, man. Can we play like this every week? Can we keep putting it together? It's what Marlon's been talking about. We're going to get this pass defense right. We're going to figure it out. We got to play better. It's not on the coaches. Eventually, you got to go out and prove that. I think they took a good step towards it today, but you got to keep putting it together, and the offense has got to show up against a Chargers team that I think is going to be a tough out next Monday night.
Yeah, I honestly raw dogged this entire post game before looking at the box score. Maybe we should do this more often, but team stats, yeah, Ravens 329 to 303 on yards. They outgained him. I don't think that's surprising per se. There was the graphic late the first half in terms of yards per play. It felt like we were at 6.9 yaw pace versus about 3 from the Steelers. That was everything you needed to know at that juncture of the game. It was like, now I thought about this late in the fourth quarter. They did move the football better against us in the second half, and it felt like we kind of played the same second half that we did in the first half. They kind of like figured it out a little bit on us, a little throw over the top to like Russell Wilson to Pickens down the left sideline was like a classic, like Pickens ball, or not Pickens, Russell Wilson ball that just flutters and just drops.
Russie Moonball.
Just a Russie Moonball. It was like, oh my God, like, what are you gonna do about that? Would love to see, obviously, what's his name, Stevens turn around, find the football. But I think the big thing here, 36 minutes possession on the Steelers versus 23 minutes possession for the Ravens. Feeds into the entire idea that we just like never controlled the game. Like the fumble from the top, I don't want to point toward to it more than it needs to be pointed at, but like you try to win the toss and defer. You want to have the 2-for-1. You get the football though. You want to make hay, and you want to make a statement, and making a fumble there just puts you on your heels the entire time. I'm not saying whatsoever that's why the result was what it was, but it certainly had an impact. And man, what can you say? Like Derrick Henry, love the guy to death. He's been amazing. That's a tough, tough fumble, and it felt like it just kind of set the tone for the day in a way that you wish it just didn't.
Yeah,
So,
his first fumble of the year, and his first
first
fumble in a
lost
while.
one, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, first lost fumble of the year. And yeah, I think it did set a tone. I think when it's funny, it's you see this on Ravens Twitter sometimes when Tucker misses, it's like, oh, that we're losing. When that guy misses, we lose. Hasn't been his problem this year because he's missed a lot. But the Henry fumble, losing that, I think that definitely set a weird tone. I was stunned that they had outgained them to the extent that they had in the first half when they put that graphic up, because to your point, it just wasn't resulting in anything, and they weren't able to set a tone or play the game on their terms. It felt like they were playing on the Steelers' terms that whole way. But again, that just speaks to how the defense really stood on their head and
Yeah.
stood up, and they should be proud of the way they bounced back in this one after a really tough game against the Bengals. I think, or nice job getting that tandem of Washington and Hamilton really cemented. I think that's going to be key going forward. And yeah, hopefully Roquan's okay.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting towards closing thoughts here. So my closing thoughts, I'll just throw this out there, is nothing happened today that made me feel any differently about what these two teams' capable like ceilings or floors are. You could tell me if I'm wrong, Jake, but I don't feel like I've learned anything about these two teams today. Um, what's frustrating is obviously, well, the result's frustrating, but um, the Steelers have that voodoo magic, and they played the exact type of game that they probably talked about in their house all week. The notion of burning, oh, those guys will burn down their house, is painfully, painfully, frustratingly, seemingly true. And it wasn't even said this week. It was said last year.
That's a Christopher Moltisanti moment. Like, you're sitting there in the intervention and you are hearing shit that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. And let me tell you, the intervention has not worked thus far. I mean, I saw your boiler, your head in the toilet bowl, disgusting, and
I
they don't do
didn't.
anything about it.
Yeah, I didn't even write the shit down. I just say shit.
Yeah,
Fuck. I still feel. Well, I don't. Like that's exactly the fucking pretzel I'm in. Like, come playoff time, all right, we got a game against these guys in late December. We, like I said, Jake, we pray that that game has implications with regards to the division, but there's a chance that they could just totally run away with it here and make it moot. Um, I would like to feel like we're just, hey, we're better than these guys. We're just gonna play better football and win. But it's the Tomlin voodoo magic. It's
I
they
think
just have.
the point you're making is about ceiling, right? And what are the ceiling of these two teams? I think because the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, they could win a Super Bowl. I don't think the Steelers could do it because they do not have an offense that
Right.
has
Right.
that high of ceiling. I think Wilson's
Totally.
been good. He's been very serviceable. He's definitely been better than a lot of people would have thought when they were clowning them for signing him. But overall, he's just not he's not one of the five quarterbacks that I think could win a Super Bowl in this league. I look at Mahomes, I look at Allen, I look at Lamar, I look at Burrow. Maybe Purdy could, because the Niners, they've surrounded him with talent enough to get him there. But overall, this is like, that's what frustrates me about this, is that the Steelers team reminds me a lot of these recent Tomlin playoff teams, where they get there and then they get exposed because the ceiling is just not high enough. I think the Ravens ceiling is high enough, but they can't afford to beat themselves in a playoff game like they did today and like they have in some of these other games.
I'm workshopping my thought on this, and I feel that we're going to beat them in our barn in December.
Barn.
If only because the bounce back of just, hey, it's Raven Steelers. It never goes, whatever. I'm trying to work my way through, like, okay, I feel like the way the wins and losses have gone for these two teams with the standings, it's like, hey, there's probably a very good chance of a postseason matchup between these two. I don't feel confident in Pittsburgh whatsoever because I don't trust this team to just not be anything more than what we saw today. Like,
I would say in a
you know what
hypothetical
I mean?
rematch, yeah, I'd say in a hypothetical rematch, I would expect Wilson to connect on a deep touchdown to Pickens like he didn't today, but I would also expect the Ravens to not turn the ball over 3 times like they did and miss 2 field goals.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
that's where I'd come down on it.
I would want to feel better about it, but I just uh, uh, it's so frustrating just because I feel like we're a better football team than them, and we lost a game on the road by 2 points. You're kind of expected to do that within the division at least once, twice, whatever. It's just the way it shakes out. It's frustrating that it's to them. It's frustrating that it was the way that it was. Again, like I said, I feel very confident that we win in December against them. I am frustrated by the notion that the consequence of the win today might mean that we have to travel to them in mid to late January. And when we do that, I don't know that I trust our guys to go do what needs to be done there. If they do, that'll be fucking satisfying as shit.
That
It'll
would
be fucking
be
magnificent.
if they don't win the Super Bowl, that would be a nice consolation prize
Agreed.
to get that done. But yeah, I mean, overall, that's where you get yourself in trouble, losing games to the Raiders at home that you have no business losing, and losing to the Browns in that game that you lose. That's just like you could afford to lose this game a lot more if you had not let one of those two slip through your fingers. And that's where I get a little concerned about the ceiling with this Ravens team. But overall, if you have Lamar Jackson, I think you can win a Super Bowl. And I don't want to be too much of a prisoner in the moment because I felt like they can do it after that 5-game win streak. Still have faith in the squad, but it's really tough the night after one of these ones happens. And all you can do is just throw your hands up and say, I'm pissed off. They played like a bunch of assholes. And what else can you say?
What else can you say? Just beat the Chargers next week. Gosh, tough slate here. Chargers, Eagles. To get to the very late bye week, like you can't donut that stretch. You can't.
You absolutely
You can't
you
donut it.
absolutely cannot. No, you can't.
I would think and hope that they would win both, but like they're good teams. Like realistically speaking, 1-1 is probably the more realistic result there. And where does that land us? It lands us at 8-5. Like, is that? It lands you in the area of like, oh, Jake's gonna fucking victory lap his little 10-7 prediction.
What was your prediction? I don't think we had you on that pod.
We didn't. No, I thought we were 12-5 all the way. 12-5
Okay.
division winner.
Well, you weren't spenny with the 14-3. That's looking a little tough right now. I'll say that.
Right in the middle. So, all right.
Okay.
Skirt.
All right. Skirt.
Up,
Yep. Thank you all for hanging with us after a tough one, a frustrating one. Probably my least favorite loss of the year. If I had to rank them like my children, this one would be sitting right at the bottom. This would be the Kieran Culkin, Roman Roy of the losses so far this season.
Oh, the see it in the bathroom and pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be staring at the screen as emails are just filtering in about what a disaster I found myself in.
Oh, trust in JT, please. Keep your goddamn arms down about that. Fucking A.
As Dutch Vanderlyn said, we have got to keep the faith. So yeah. Faith is about things. Faith and belief are about things that you can't see sometimes, and we're not seeing it right now with Justin Tucker. But just hang in there, guys. I'm begging you. If for nothing else, in your own sanity, because again, he's not going anywhere. But again, thank you guys for hanging with us. Frustrating loss. Appreciate everyone in the comments here. Appreciate you hanging with me in my pared down setup. We'll be back at you this week. I will be on the road in SoCal. I'll actually be in enemy territory this week. I thought about hanging around to maybe go out to SoFi Stadium for that game, but it's on a Monday, so I didn't feel like hanging around for that extra day. But nonetheless, we'll be back to cover that game. I'm sure Spenny will have content going throughout the week covering the Ravens. Maybe we'll get you on a preview, Banks. on this coming
I'm
Thursday
here.
night to join.
Hey,
Yeah.
holler at
Yep.
your boy.
I won't be there, so we'll get you out of the bullpen. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us here on YouTube. Comment on all the videos, get all that going. Spread a word, tell a friend about the X52 podcast. Great way to spread word about the podcast is through word of mouth. You can find us on social media at Exit52 Podcast on X. I am at Jake Louque. That's Louque. Brian is at Barstool Banks. Spenny at Ravens 4 Dummies. That is the number 4. Taylor at Taylor Smythe 10. And Eric at EDITTI 22. Shout out to Jimmy's Famous Seafood. Shout out to Black Eyed Susan Spices. Clipper City Barber Company, Fed Thrill Sunglasses. We appreciate them all. We appreciate you all. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon.